tab out, back to Zoom, and hit share my screen. Over. Okay. Wow, look at that. Everything's ready to go. I was quite concerned that it would not be working after I came back from vacation, that I would have changed something or other, and that it would all be a complete nonsense, but it's working fine. All right, we'll just give it another minute now that everything is up and running to allow people who are on YouTube to join. Second to just resize another window. Okay. Oh, no, don't roll off the screen. That's where we're starting. All right. Well, 12:01, that's our sort of official, unofficial start time. So let's go ahead and get down to work. Those of you that are watching this archived, you're in luck because those of you in person, it's been about a month since we've had a chance to study together. And I hope that you did a little review. If not, don't worry, I'll bring you up to speed because speed is the name of the game today. That is to say, we have been wrestling with the idea of what it will look like during the end of days in this section of Sanhedrin, the section of Talmud, and we have been bouncing around different ideas of peace and ideas of war, ideas of rest, ideas of natural state or of some supernatural events. But now we're getting into the question of, well, when is this actually going to occur? Now, you may notice that we have not come to a firm and definitive answer yet on all those other points. The Talmud is a collection of argumentation. It's a collection of debate. And while for halachic matters, issues that have a direct one-to-one correlation with how we behave, the Talmud will always seek a resolution wherever possible. So, for example, is it what time do we say the Shema in the evening, which is the first section of the very first page of the very first volume of Talmud? They eventually come to a full analyzed conclusion. Whereas when we are dealing with topics such as this that do not have a fixed halakhic legal implication, oftentimes the discussion will be left unresolved. Now, unresolved does not mean unguided. Very importantly, the Talmud is giving us two rather important lessons throughout this entire section. One is that it is never as clear as someone may make it seem like it's supposed to be. This is why, as you've all heard me say many times before, and I will say until I am cold and buried in the ground and find out what Olam Haba is like firsthand, that the person who comes to you with the definitive answer, with the idiot's guide to any of these types of topics, is either an idiot themselves or somebody that is deliberately trying to mislead you for their own personal gain, whether it be for their status, attention, or direct profit, or some combination of those three. So the Talmud, by showing us the variety of opinions, by showing us the debate, and we're going to get a doozy of one today, is giving us that preparation, the inoculation against those who are a little too sure of themselves when dealing with some of the most obscure and esoteric topics within our people. As we did talk about with the very first class, this doesn't mean Judaism doesn't care about these topics. That is a misnomer when people say, oh, Judaism only cares about what we do, not about what happens at the end of the day. That is entirely false. We certainly will work until we come to a resolution for these days because we have to do something. But that doesn't mean we ignore the topic, as you can see by the multiple pages of Talmud that we have gone through, that this was a very lively topic of debate. But the other thing the Talmud is doing, both here and in those halakhic debates, and the reason why the Talmud has remained a canonical book within the Jewish people, that is to say, a book that is universally accepted as being binding and guiding for the Jewish people across the four corners of the globe and across the thousands of years since its compilation, is that it is teaching us how to actually think. And by think, I don't just mean analyze logically, although it is good at that. I mean to actually approach topics, to ask the right questions, and to both analyze the text of Torah and the rest of the Tanakh, the Bible, as well as to analyze the statements of each other and to subject ourselves to proper analysis and analysis. This is the ultimate purpose of the Talmud, because nobody can ever create a compilation of all the answers, because there isn't a way to compile answers for questions that have not yet been asked, and certainly for questions that have not yet been answered. So instead, the Talmud's primary objective is to compile these debates and this discussion so that through our engagement with it, we will change our mind, not to come to a particular conclusion regarding this or that, but instead to come to an understanding of how we approach these topics. For me, this is the ultimate gift of the Talmud, because a person who seeks a confirmation, who seeks confidence, who seeks the removal of all ambiguity from their life is always going to be disappointed or deluded. The Talmud tells us how to be comfortable with some ambiguity. Doesn't mean we give up the search. It doesn't mean we don't engage. It doesn't mean we don't try to find all the firm ground that we can, but it does mean that we recognize that each thing we find that provides a certain amount of surety is always going to be based upon a limited engagement. There is always more to come. And where we stop for today, where we stop for tomorrow, where we stop for this point in our life is never the final conclusion. This cannot be reduced to a simple understanding, because there is no simple understanding of the mind of God. So through the engagement of the Talmud, through this study of it as a spiritual exercise, not merely as a research tool, we come to better deal with the various troubles and uncertainties within our own daily life. Facing the headlines, facing the upheaval within our own personal lives, facing all of the difficulties and confusion that are the unfortunate companion of life, we can come to a better feeling of, I may not understand everything, but I don't have to still be able to take a step forward, to still know a little bit more where I should go next. I may not know where I'm going 100 years from now. I may not know where I'm going 10 years from now, but I can find my path, at least that one step forward. And the analysis of the Talmud of these esoteric and mundane topics is a wonderful way to condition ourselves to be able to approach that. So that's just a little commercial of why we're spending so much time in Talmud, and why it's really after the Tanakh itself, my favorite book of Judaism. But let's dive back into the topic at hand, which is, of course, the end of days. Now, end of days implies, well, an end, and that implies a timeline. And we are now going to delve into that. So let's go ahead and get a first bite. We'll talk about it, and then we'll move on. Rav Katina says, 6,000 years is the duration of the world. Now, if we are applying the universally accepted Jewish calendar, which counts from the years of creation, then that would work out to be about the year 2240. We are currently in 5786. So obviously we have a little bit more to go before we get to 6,000. So if we were following that, that's where he would be talking about. 6,000 years is the duration of the world. And it is in ruins for 1,000 years, meaning that there would be 1,000 years in addition, or 1,000 years at the end of that, in which this is considered to be a ruinous occurrence. Now, obviously, from the time of Rav Katina, this is in the distant future. Obviously, the year 2240 is a long way after the final editing and compilation of the Talmud, which happened around the years 500 to 700. But even the year 1200, if we were to predate this, would be a long time in his future. Now, the duration of the period during which the world is in ruins is derived from a verse, as it is stated, and the Lord shall be exalted on that day. Now, we know that a day of God lasts 1,000 years. Now, you don't know that yet, but we're going to come to the proof text of that in just a few sentences, so hold your horses. But the idea is that one day for God equals 1,000 years. Abaye says, it is in ruins for 2,000 years. As it is stated, after 2 days he will revive us, in the third day he will revive us, and we shall live in his presence. So from Hosea, we get 2 days worth of revivification, and that then is being 2 days in the process of this time and tumult of the coming of the Messiah, and therefore there will be 2,000 years of that. It is taught in the Braita, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Katina, our first version, just as the sabbatical year abrogates debts once in 7 years, so too the world abrogates its typical existence for 1,000 years in every 7,000 years. As it is stated, and the Lord alone shall be exalted on that day. And it states, here is our proof, a psalm, a song for the Shabbat day, meaning a day, 1,000 years, that is entirely Shabbat. So Shabbat, which is linked to the sabbatical as a cessation, is a day, and we have 1 day for Shabbat out of the 7 days of the year, of the week, and we have 1 year for the sabbatical out of the 7 years of the cycle, and we have 1,000 years out of the 7,000 years of existence for this period. Therefore, it says in explanation of the equation between 1 day and 1,000 years, now from Psalm 90, for 1,000 years in your eyes are but like yesterday when it is past, and like a watch in the night. So we have an explicit reference to the idea that a single day for God is equivalent to 1,000 years for us. Now, is that what the original intent was of the book of Psalms? Probably not in Pshat. It was simply trying to say that what we think is a long time is a trivial amount of time to God, the same way that a day is trivial to us compared to a longer span of a human life. But it is being used here as a tool for calculation. We're going to come back on that idea of calculation. As we've already seen, there are many that object to calculation in principle. Now, the school of Eliyahu taught 6,000 years is the duration of the world. 2,000 years of the 6,000 years are characterized by chaos. 2,000 years are characterized by Torah, that is to say, from the era of the patriarchs until the end of the Mishnaic period. And 2,000 years are the period of the coming of the Messiah, which is what we would now be in. Now, before we continue this line of arguing, there's some very important ideas being introduced here that I would like us to consider. You don't have to come to a firm resolution, as I said earlier, but when many people talk about the end of days, the coming of the Messiah, they talk about it as though it were a light switch, that at some point there's going to be, bam, the coming of the Messiah, and all the events, all of the signs of the apocalypse and all of the other nonsense are all going to happen, boom, 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 super fast, and then the Messiah is there, and the world has been turned over into this new realm of existence. This section of the Talmud asks us to entertain a different notion, that in fact, the coming of the Messiah could be 2,000 years long, that it is not something that we should necessarily assume is going to be an overnight sensation, that we as humans have a natural tendency to think of things as being liminal events, as being a watershed moment, as moving from one room to the next. But anyone who has done a good job of studying history will note that even terms like the Middle Ages or the Renaissance or the Enlightenment are extremely misleading. While we can definitely say that certain periods are within them, if we try to say when precisely did it begin, when precisely did it end, you are going to find that good historians will argue about this, and most of them will argue that there isn't a cutoff period. It's not as though at some point in the late Middle Ages, everyone said, all right, guys, from now on, it's the Renaissance.
Ok,
Let's change our
cuéntame,
clothes,
¿qué
let's
seguimos con
change
esto?
our art,
De que si le
let's change
quitamos esto de por
everything
quién va.
else that we're doing. It's time to be in the Renaissance mode. No, the transition happened gradually, and it happened piecemeal, and it happened in a way that probably was not even perceptible to the people who were living through it. They probably thought things were just going along as usual. And yeah, there were a few changes, but things always change a little. And it was the accumulation of change that led to the final concept that things were now fundamentally different, that could only be understood in the hindsight of many, many decades, if not centuries later. So too, the Talmud is here telling us we might want to consider that we are not waiting for the beginning of the coming of the Messiah, that we are in the beginning of the coming of the Messiah, and we don't know how long it's already been going on. It is entirely possible that the last 1,000 years, the last 1,500 years have all been part of the preamble of that transition. And if so, we are still, if we're going by Rav Katina's opinion, we are still a couple hundred years away from the full realization of that. But we are in the midst of it. And so rather than looking for the war of Gog and Magog or the coming of the Messiah in the headlines of any particular day, recognize that this is symptomatic of a longer period of time, and that can allow us to understand that we are already living in the end of days, and so were people who lived 1,000 years ago. Now, is that the only way to understand it? Absolutely not. We already saw argumentation here that the difference between 1,000 and 2,000, we will see other arguments as well. So it's not the only way to look at it, but as a way of approaching life and realizing that change and the ultimate culmination of God's will through the redemption of the world is not something that will only happen as a blinding flash, but is something that does happen in an incremental way that will take eons to fulfill, is not a wrong way of looking at the world, and indeed is oftentimes a very healthy way. Many times in our own personal life, when we're looking for things to be better, when we want things to change for the better, we often are looking for a flash that will make everything better. If I get this promotion, if I find this person to date, if I have this particular experience, then everything will be different. Well, we might want to reflect that, as we see here in the Talmud, that doesn't work for the world, and it's not necessarily how it works for each of us individually as well. That any true change and betterment of our life is going to be gradual. And while there are certainly certain explosive moments in many lives, those are the exception rather than the rule. And we need to look for the gradual path as the path forward for each one of us. All right, we'll get back to the Talmud and away from the sermon, because we have to come to what is a major topic of debate and discussion in this portion of our analysis, which is redemption purely a time-locked event? Are we just waiting for the final whistle? Sorry to use the soccer, football, for those of you international metaphor. Are we just waiting for the final whistle to blow? And in the meantime, there's nothing we can do to make it happen earlier and nothing we can do to make it happen later. Well, as we see here on page 97b, that is the course, meaning the breakdown of the world into nice increments. That is the course that history was to take, but due to our many sins, well, the Messiah did not come after 4,000 years passed, and furthermore, the years that elapsed since then, which were to have been the Messianic era, have elapsed. So if you are reading this as being 2000, and then we're on the right way, we've kind of seemed to have missed that window. Why? Because of our sins, which means that we are off script, that we are improvising. Does that mean redemption isn't going to happen? You can begin to see why this is a tense concept. The previous one was tense because if you said it's not going to happen until the year 2200, then people basically say, well, what's the point of doing anything right now if redemption's not coming for another 200 years? Here we have the opposite issue. If redemption was supposed to happen 1,000 years ago, and it still hasn't happened, then why should we think that it will ever happen? In both cases, we lose hope. If we fix a date that is too far in the future, we lose hope for improvement within our own time. And if we fix a date that was in the past that has already elapsed, we lose hope for our own time. And the idea of the Messiah and of redemption is meant to engender hope, not despair. We're going to have to argue our way through this and come to a better understanding that will allow us to continue to have some hope. So let's go ahead and see an example of that internal tension of feeling like we've missed our window and see where we go from there. Elijah the prophet said to Rav Yehuda, brother of Rav Salah Hasidah. So remember, Elijah, as he left this world in a fiery chariot, is held as being this liminal figure, that is to say, a foot in both worlds, this world as well as the world of heaven. And that means that he has special insight, but is also able to interact with this world and occasionally talk to special people. So here is Elijah's conversation. The world will exist no longer than 85 Jubilee cycles. Now, we do 85 Jubilee cycles from the beginning of creation. That would be about the year 4250 in the Jewish calendar, which would be about the year 490 CE, about 1500 years ago. Well, and during the final Jubilee, 1500 years ago, the son of David will come. Rav Yehuda said to Elijah, will the Messiah come during the beginning of the Jubilee or during its end? Elijah said to Rav Yehuda, I do not know. Rav Yehuda asked, will this last Jubilee cycle end before the Messiah comes, or will it not end before his coming? Elijah said to him, I do not know. All right. So Rav Yehuda is asking for a pinpoint accuracy on the arrival of Messiah. He wants to know more than just the year-ish that the Messiah will be coming. He wants to know which place within the year, the beginning or the end, that this is going to occur. And Elijah is saying that he doesn't know. Now, the fact that Elijah doesn't know is already going to give us pause. But we're going to see that Rav Ashi is going to analyze this in a different way. Rav Ashi says, this is what Elijah said to him. As is often the case in the Talmud, a different scholar will have a different tradition regarding the same idea, regarding the same teaching. In this particular case, Rav Ashi has a teaching that what Elijah actually said to Rav Yehuda was a little different. What he actually said was, until that time, meaning the 85 Jubilee cycles, do not anticipate his coming. From this point forward, anticipate his coming. That is to say, Elijah did not inform Rav Yehuda of the date of the coming of the Messiah. So what Rav Ashi has done is said that he has a tradition that says this exchange with Elijah wasn't about telling you what year he will arrive, which is why when Rav Yehuda is asking for the specifics, Elijah is like, I don't know, because Elijah wasn't coming to tell him the arrival date. He was coming to tell him of the arrival option, meaning that from that moment of 85 Jubilee cycles, the Messiah could arrive, but there is no set time during that time, meaning from 490 onward, that the I can speak English, that the Messiah must arrive. So it'd be like saying, what time are you going to, or when are you going to visit for the summer? And someone says, well, school's not out until, let's imagine, June 1st. So I can't be there before June 1st. Now, does that mean they're going to be there on June 2nd? No. Instead, what it means is don't expect them before June 1st. After June 1st, it could be any time. But is that helpful or unhelpful? Well, personally, I think Rav Ashi did us a very good service here, because what he has said is we are now all within the window in which the Messiah could come. The Messiah could come at any point. Prior to that 85 Jubilee cycles, we should not have expected the Messiah to arrive. It was too early. But now the Messiah indeed could come at any point. Could have come 1,000 years ago, didn't. Could have come 500 years ago, didn't. Could come now, hasn't, as far as I know to this point. Could come 1,000 years from now. We don't know when, but we know that it is still possible. We have not missed our window, meaning the Messiah is still coming. Now, why is the Messiah not yet here if the window has already opened? Well, that is going to be a subject of further debate. So let's go ahead and continue with opinions on that, on this issue of timing. Rav Hanan ben Tachlifa sent a message to Rav Yosef. I found one man, and in his hand there was one scroll written in the Asherit script and in the sacred tongue, meaning Hebrew. I said to him, from where did this scroll come into your possession? This is an unusual thing, kind of like we would have found the Dead Sea Scrolls. This man has a very rare document, and he wants to know where it's from. He said to me, I was hired to serve in the Roman army, and I found the scroll among the Roman archives. And it was clear that the scroll was written by Jews, not Romans. Now, this is very possible because the Romans looted a great deal of our country, and when they looted it, some of our writings and texts might have ended up in their possession and no longer been in ours. And it is written in the scroll, after 4,291 years, which would be approximately the year 531, have elapsed from the creation of the world will end. During those years, there will be wars among the sea monsters between the Leviathan and the animals, and among those years there will be the wars of Gog and Magog, and the remaining years of the Messianic period. Then the world will be destroyed. The Holy One, blessed be He, will renew His world only after a passage of 7,000 years. Rav Acha said, son of Rava, says that it was stated after the passage of 5,000 years. Okay, so this scroll, which obviously is not extant, the only evidence we have for it is in this particular teaching, gives a firm date that the world is going to hit this moment in the year 531, and that there is going to be all of these various occurrences that we have talked about, well, specifically Gog and Magog and the arrival of the Messiah. Now, that date has passed. So what do we take from this? Is this the Messianic period? Is this after the destruction of the world? I seem to be here. This seems to be an example of a mistaken calculation of somebody who put into writing what they believed would happen, but what did not happen. Now, we know that because we live after the year 531. But it is possible that our ancestors were still expecting this to be in their future. What is important to recognize is that those who have tried to come up with dates have been found wanting. That when you put it down as a calculation, you end up missing the mark. Now, we can say that about calculations that are in the past, because we in the future know what did or didn't happen. But we can then extrapolate from that and say any current calculations that people are coming up with are likewise fallacious, that the text does not lend itself to that level of calculation and precision. Instead, we have to be in hope, we have to be in a state of hope and anticipation. But we still have to ask ourselves about this time delay, because it seems still very odd that the Messiah has not yet come. And so what do we do? Well, let's take a look at a Braita. So this is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Natan says, this verse penetrates and descends until the depths. Just as the depths are unfathomable, so too the period depicted in the following verse is unquantifiable. What is this verse? For the vision is yet for the appointed time, and it declares of the end and does not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not delay. All right, so this verse in and of itself, before we get to Rabbi Natan's interpretation, is already very difficult to unpack. It's clearly talking about the appointed time, which is being used as a reference to the coming of the Messiah. But most importantly, it says that it may tarry, but you should still wait for it, but it will surely come and it will not delay. Well, how can it not delay if it is tarrying? If something is tarrying, that means it is late. But if something has not delayed, that means it's on time. So it already seems to be internally contradictory, which is good, because this is meant to remind us that figuring out the end of days is not something as simple as just adding up references in different verses. So let's go to Rabbi Natan's analysis. The Messiah will not come in accordance with the opinion of our rabbis who interpret the verse for a period and periods and a half period, which is to mean that the duration of the ultimate exile will be 3.5 times the duration of the period of the exile in Egypt. So Rabbi Natan is using this work in Habakkuk and its internal confusion to say, for those who try to interpret the book of Daniel as saying this gives us a formula of 3.5 to use for the final exile to be the length of the final exile, which its conclusion will give us the arrival of the Messiah, that the people who use that kind of formula have to be wrong, because the coming of the Messiah is not subject to formulation. Habakkuk makes it clear it's going to be delayed and not delayed, which is there to just tell us stop counting. So, and the Messiah will not come in accordance, meaning another person who is rejected, thanks to Habakkuk, and the Messiah will come not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Simlai, who would interpret the verse, "You have fed them with the bread of tears and have given them the tears to drink in great measure," from Psalm 80, to mean that the duration of ultimate exile will be 3 times, a great measure, shalish, being close to shalosh, the Hebrew word for 3, of the duration of the period of exile in Egypt. Now, recognize that these calculations were meant to try and give clarity to people during the latter stages of Roman occupation and post-destruction. So as people were really trying to figure out, how long are we going to have to wait for this? The exile in Babylon only took 70 years. Are we measuring off that, or are we now measuring off the exile in Egypt? And in the exile in Egypt, does that count as 400 years? Does that count as the lesser measure of how long we were actually in Egypt itself from the coming of Jacob, or does it measure only the period in which we were enslaved, which is the shortest still? All of those were important calculations to people who were living through the disaster of Roman occupation and destruction. And Rabbi Natan is saying, don't do the math. This doesn't work. And the Messiah will not come in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who lived during the time of the Bar Kokhba revolt, who sought to speed up the redemption to remove the Romans. And indeed, many, including Rabbi Akiva, declared that Bar Kokhba himself was the Messiah. And Rabbi Natan is saying it will not work the way Rabbi Akiva thinks. Rabbi Akiva interprets the verse, "Yet once it is a little while, and I will shake the heavens and the earth," which is to mean that the redemption would transpire soon after the destruction of the temple. And indeed, Rabbi Akiva and the other the Bar Kokhba rebels were attempting to overthrow the Roman occupation about 70 years, a little bit less than the destruction, since the destruction of that second temple. So these were people who were of a mind that redemption was going to happen fast rather than for a long time. And Habakkuk says to all of them, it doesn't work like that. You're just going to have to wait. You're just going to have to wait. It will definitely happen, but there is no way to figure out when it's going to happen. Rather, the first great Hashmonean monarchy ruled 70 years. The second kingdom of Herod and his descendants ruled 52 years. And the duration of the monarchy of Bar Kokhba, was 2.5 years. The duration of the exile that follows is unknown, right? Don't try and do the math. It just doesn't work. And in fact, as you can see, these attempts at Jewish sovereignty and redemption are actually rapidly becoming worse. The Hashmoneans were only lasted 70 years, and they got progressively worse. The rule of Herod was shorter and progressively worse, and Bar Kokhba was the shortest still, and was entirely marked by war and destruction. So yeah, we're not at the time during this time of Rabbi Natan to be even contemplating that the Messiah is imminent. Instead, we have to know it's unknown. and we're just going to have to wait. And that act of waiting is extremely important, as we will see in our discussion later on. Actually, let me just take a drink. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the phrase, and it declares of the end and does not lie? Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says that Rabbi Yonatan says, may those who calculate the end of days be cursed, as they would say, once the end of days that they calculated arrived and the Messiah did not come, that he will no longer come at all. So here we get Rabbi Yonatan, as transmitted by Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, saying, stop calculating. Stop trying to figure out the time, because it's going to come and the Messiah won't arrive. And then you are going to say, the Messiah is never coming, right? It's not going to happen. Now, Rabbi Yonatan perhaps was not aware of the other coping mechanisms that people have. In modern days, we've had much better research into apocalyptic cults, and those that set dates for when the world is going to end have a remarkable intellectual flexibility at reinterpreting their prophecies in order to account for the fact that the world hasn't ended. But Rabbi Yonatan is expecting people to behave more rationally, where when they believe the Messiah is supposed to come on August 1st, 2000, whatever, and he doesn't show up, that they will just now say the Messiah isn't coming, that this is not going to happen. Rather, says Rabbi Yonatan, the proper behavior is to continue to wait for his coming. As it is stated, all the way back up in Habakkuk, though it tarry, wait for it. Lest you say we are expectantly awaiting the end of days, and the Holy One, blessed be he, is not awaiting the end of days and does not want to redeem his people. The verse states, and therefore will the Lord wait to be gracious to you, and therefore he will be exalted to have mercy upon you. For the Lord is a God of judgment. Happy are all they who wait for him. So from Isaiah 30, we know that God too is waiting for this moment. All right. That should have triggered a very significant question. We're supposed to wait. It's good to wait. All right, I got that from Habakkuk. But surely God isn't anticipating anything. I mean, God knows when it's going to happen. I mean, literally, God knows when it will happen. But Rabbi Yonatan here, is introducing the idea that God himself is looking forward to it, that God also is waiting for this moment, that there is an anticipation for God as well, that God wants this to happen. Now, that should trigger a very important question, which is, if God wants it and we want it, why isn't it happening? What's the holdup? I mean, what? And so let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, we've already touched on this perhaps in a little bit by talking about the issue of sin as being a potential delayer. But let's go ahead and see what this section is going to give us. And seemingly, since we are awaiting the end of days, and the Holy One, blessed be he, is also awaiting the end of days, who is preventing the coming of the Messiah? Right? The Talmud asks the question that's on everybody's mind. It is the divine attribute of judgment that prevents his coming, meaning justice keeps it from happening. As it is written, for the Lord is a God of judgment, and thus implying we are not worthy. That God wants it to happen, but we're not good enough. And since the attribute of judgment prevents the coming of the Messiah and we are not worthy of redemption, why do we await then his coming daily? Right? Very important question. If you're going to tell me that the reason that the redemption hasn't happened is because we're not worthy of it, then why should I wake up each day in hopeful anticipation of the coming of the Messiah? Are we all suddenly worthy about it on the next day, in the next morning, next hour? How am I supposed to have anticipation if I think that it is strict justice that keeps the Messiah from coming, unless I believe that all of a sudden we're all worthy of it? And that seems like a tall order. I can believe in God, but can I believe in my neighbors? God may want the Messiah to come, but if my neighbors are jerks, and I know they are, not my personal neighbors, this is a hypothetical, then I I have no hope, because now it's contingent upon the behavior of me and others. And even if I'm arrogantly believing that I'm worthy of redemption, I may not believe that of my neighbor, then you've now taken away my hope again. And I'm left despairing because I can't believe in people, even if I can believe in God. So why in the world am I supposed to actually have hope? How am I supposed to have hope? Well, answer number one, and we will be revisiting this, so if it's not satisfying, hold on. We do so. We have hope each day to receive a reward for awaiting his coming. As it is stated, happy are all they who wait for him, as we talked about before. So the act of hope is a spiritual act, even if it is not a logical act. That even if we are not personally convinced that everyone around us is righteous enough to make us worthy of redemption, trying to believe still with hope that this world could be redeemed at any point is an act that draws us closer to God, and for which we are rewarded, that we receive spiritual support, strength, and uplift through this action. And that is a good enough reason, even if we believe that there is some judicial barrier that is likely preventing this Messiah from coming at any particular moment. Now, this is an incredibly helpful insight. Again, even if we're going to contradict it and argue against it later on, remember, that's what Talmud does. That doesn't mean that this is worthless. This particular passage is wrong just because others contradict it. It means that there are truths here that we can draw from, even if we don't use them as the primary conclusion to the primary question. But understanding that we can still have hope, even when, according to our calculations, we're not worthy, is an important way of, one, giving us hope even when we don't feel worthy. Two, giving us hope even when we don't think someone else is worthy, meaning to say that we don't look with unmitigated resentment at those around us who we believe are preventing the coming of the Messiah. But most importantly, it prevents us from relying upon our own calculation. Who are we to determine whether or not the world is worthy now of the coming of the Messiah? We may have our own ideas, often shaded and jaded by the various forms of information bubbles we live in these days. But who's to say that that is God's calculation for whether the world is worthy for the redemption? And if you believe so, you are violating the same principle of not calculating the end as surely as somebody who gives an actual calendar date. We laugh at those who say, oh, you think you know it's going to finish on August 1st, 2035. Yeah, we laugh at them because what do they think they're doing? But if you say it's not going to end on July 8th, 2026, because I have calculated that the world is lacking, you are committing the same crime. You are committing the same fallacy. And you are depriving yourself and everyone else around who you share this attitude with of hope. And the whole point is we are meant to have hope. Judaism is built on the concept of hope, that the world can be better, and that it can be better gradually, and it can be better suddenly, that it can be better in the slow incremental of improvement of society. It can also be made better through the rapid exodus of our people from slavery. We believe in both paradigms, and we believe that both are always possible at any given point. So, while it is true that there are some opinions that say the only thing stopping redemption right now is the injustice of the world, we should not believe that that injustice is so transparently obvious that it would be impossible for the Messiah to come today. And likewise, again, for our own personal lives, very often we think by our own counting that we or others around us are causing such a problem, are so flawed, that all the things that we hope for are impossible, that are beyond even imagining that they could exist or happen. But who are we to calculate? Yes, taking honest and good stock of yourself and others around you is important, and not being Pollyannic and ridiculous. But so too not being so overly pessimistic that you believe that your life or the life of the world around you is fundamentally broken in a way that prevents all goodness. Either extreme is flawed. All right, we still have some time. We're going to press on a little bit more because on this topic, we're going to introduce a concept that has some widespread awareness, but also misunderstanding. So let's go ahead and see where we get for this. Apropos that verse, our verse from Isaiah, Isaiah 30, Abaye said, "The world has no fewer than 36 righteous people in each generation who greet the divine presence, as it is stated, happy are all they who wait for him." Now, wait for him, the pronoun at the end there is lo. The numerical value of lo, spelled lamed vav, is 36. So, who are the ones that wait for him? The 36 special righteous people that do so. And indeed, you'll often hear people in modern Jewish circles talk about the 36 righteous, or the lamed vavniks, the 36 people that are special and are the ones that, and unfortunately, have mutated in modern retellings, modern meaning the last couple hundred years, as though it were only because of those 36 that the world continues to exist. That is one way to interpret it, not, I think, the correct or preferred way. But let's go ahead and see an initial challenge to this number of 36 in any case. The Gemara asks, is that so? Oh, wait, what do you mean there's only 36? But doesn't Rava say, the row of the righteous before the Holy One, blessed be he, extends 18,000 parasangs? As it is stated with regard to the city of God at the end of days, here from Ezekiel, it shall be 18,000 reeds round about, and the name of the city from that day shall be, the Lord is there. Now, 18,000 parasangs is, well, a lot of just 18,000 is parasangs. A parasang is 4 miles. So we're talking like laps of the earth length of distance here. And no matter how you space people, you're going to need more than 36 to actually create 18,000 parasangs of distance. So these righteous people take up 18,000, and you're telling me 36. That doesn't seem to work. That seems contradictory. The Gemara answers, it is not difficult. This statement of Abaye about the 36 righteous people, they are the ones who view the divine presence through a luminous crystal. And that statement of Rava refers to the multitude who view the divine presence through a crystal that is not luminous. All right, so the idea of a luminous crystal or a clear crystal, this is the idea of people who are able to perceive God with almost no occlusion, that they can understand, perceive, and connect to God with very little barrier, contaminant, or misunderstanding. Whereas the 18,000 parasang righteous people, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in that category, they have a little more trouble. They're still righteous people. They are still amazing and wonderful and good, but their perception of God is slightly cloudy compared to the others. All right. Now, we've asked one question of how we reconcile this. Now we have to ask a question about the answer. The Gemara asks, and are those who view the divine presence through a crystal that is luminous so numerous? Wait. You're telling me the 36 people are the ones who see God through this beautiful, clear, bright crystal. Are there really 36 people in every generation who can do that? That actually seems a little high. So first we argued that number seemed a little low, but then when we differentiated between the crystals, we ended up thinking that number's a little high. How do we reconcile this? But doesn't Hizkiah say that Rabbi Yirmiyah says, in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, I have seen members of the group of the spiritually prominent, who are truly righteous, and they are few. How few are they? If they number 1,000, I and my son are among them. If they number 100, I and my son are among them. And if they number 2, I and my son are they. Now, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had no shortage of personal belief in his own righteousness. It's got him into trouble later on. But what is coming from this idea is apparently it is conceivable that there are no more than 2 who view the divine presence through this luminous crystal. Because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai basically argued that I don't know how many there are, but it could be as few as 2. And if it really could be as few as 2, then, it's kind of optimistic to imagine that there are 36 in every generation. The Gemara answers, it's not difficult. This statement of Abaye, the 36, is referring to those who may enter to view the divine presence only by requesting and being granted permission from the angels. That statement of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is referring to the select few who may enter to view the divine presence even without requesting permission, for whom the gates of heaven are open at all times. All right, so we reconcile this in this little section by saying that Shimon Bar Yochai was talking about the elite among the elite among the elite. That is to say, you have the 18,000 parasang elite, the righteous people, and then you have the 36 elite among them that see through the crystal, and then you have the potentially only 2 elite among that 36 that are able to enter the presence of heaven without even requesting permission. That is how powerful their righteousness is. But in any event, there are righteous people in the world. Counter to what we just saw in the previous paragraph that said that it is the strict definition of justice that is keeping the Messiah from coming, we get the idea that there are, in fact, 36 at a minimum of super powerful good people, or 18,000 parasangs worth of people, which would be in the millions, if not more, of righteous people. I mean, that doesn't sound like the world is so wanting for good people. I know that a few million doesn't sound too much these days, but remember when these rabbis were speaking and doing their calculations, the world population was a pittance. It was a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of our current billions of people. We didn't even have 1 billion people on the planet until I believe it was early 20th century, if not late 19th century. So this is a huge amount of righteous people that are being seen in Ezekiel's vision. So really, is it that the world is just not good enough for this to happen? I'm going to leave you with that question. We have more to say, obviously, about this calculation and about the idea of, is it our lack of merit that prevents the redemption? Is there some other obstacle that prevents the coming of the Messiah? Is there anything we can do in order to speed this up? And these topics are of both theological and personal importance. So I hope you'll be able to join me as we continue our discussion next week. Take care.